Come in. How are you? I got my nose in this book, The Brief History of Time. Stephen Hawking, you're probably all familiar with it. I bought it in a train station in Calcutta in 1991. It's got an interesting stamp on it. This is one of my bookmarks, which was I was sitting on seat 43F in economy from then. But yeah, it's interesting. It's not what I want to talk to you about today. It was just that I was looking at it when you knocked. But it's really interesting. There's this chapter on the arrow of time, which is well worth having a look at. He's talking about imaginary time and the arrows of time, and that there are three arrows. Yeah, three arrows. The thermodynamic arrow, the psychological arrow, and the cosmological arrow. It's got me really thinking about it, you know. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that. It's more that I'll put that one there on the pile. We may come to it. I've got my glasses fixed, thank God, so I can see properly. And I was wanting to talk to you about this book on building a global civic culture by Elise Boulding. One reason was because the last three books we've looked at have all been by men. And, you know, I don't want to give you the impression that Futures is just a male-dominated or blokey sort of space, because it's not. There are some incredibly good women working the field and growing the field and pushing in all sorts of directions, taking us on new journeys. But Elise Boulding, who died, I guess 10 years ago now or something like that, she was a foundational thinker in this space, and she integrated her Futures work with a sociological brain, as well as she was a Quaker, so a deeply spiritual, meditative sort of worldview. And at the same time, she was deeply committed to the peace movement. She was one of the foundational members of a number of the global peace organizations and so on. And so she was thinking, you know, for a long time about, well, what does it mean to build, because it's titled Building, to build a global civic culture? And, you know, and she brings it down to education. So for her, it was education. There's obviously not much time really to go through the elements of the book, but I want to pick up on a few things. One thing that Futurists are very fond of is a concept of the 200-year present, which Elise Boulding developed herself. So, and the very first chapter in this book is called Expanding Our Sense of Time and History. And she looks at civilizational, cross-cultural understandings of time, temporality, and so on, different models of time, the sort of thing that Jeannie Hoffman is talking about in lecture 4 on time. So she's covering that sort of ground. But I want to go from here to the end of the book, where she kind of sums up some of the elements that I think are very uniquely Elise, and we've picked up on this, and it's sort of flown on into current Futures work, particularly the kind of work that I like to do. But I just want to say this about the 200-year present. So she's looking at, you know, long-term, deep time and all sorts of stuff, and she said, look, there's a medium range, okay, and that's the 200-year present. That present begins 100 years ago today, on the day of birth of those among us who are now centenarians. Its other boundary, no surprises, is the 100th birthday of the babies that are born today. This present is a continuously moving moment, always reaching out 100 years in either direction from the day we are in. We are linked with both boundaries at this moment by the people among us whose life began or will end at one of those two boundary points. Interesting, because Hawking talks a lot about boundaries. And his book, 1989, this is 1980, I think it was, or maybe not. I should check. No, 1988. So they're contemporary, these books, okay? So the boundary there, so 5 generations each way in time. It is our space, one that we can move around in directly in our own lives and indirectly by touching the lives of the young and the old around us. I think it's just a beautiful conception of what it means to be in the present, because even young people who have grandparents or whatever, will have people who, have been in their lives for, even if it's just for a moment. Sometimes a great-great-grandparent who holds the babe in their arms just before they die. And then, of course, that babe lives for 100 years. So it's a very evocative, very physical, very human way, I think, of understanding that the present is not just this given moment now, but it is folded and it's lived. And I think that's something that Elise is very good at developing in this entire book. But I'm going to do, as I said, I'm going to flip to the very end. I've got other things marked here, but I have to be disciplined so that I don't sort of overwhelm you. And there are 3 little sections here that I'd like to touch on, and these are from the very last pages of her book. So it's an epilogue, you could say, and that's what she calls it. And again, she thinks in time, and as I'm saying, she's a sociologist, but she also thinks in time as a Quaker, as a spiritual person. And Quakerism has a lot of time for what she calls over here somewhere, oh, that's right, taking time for solitude. So she's making an argument that to become persons, individuals, takes time. And so that's what I want to pick up on here. She says it takes time to become a person. This is page 162. The civic culture and the public interest only develop where there are human beings with a fully developed sense of individual personhood. We can think about this today with our declining sense of civic awareness and the growing authoritarianism and so on again. So she says self-centeredness, the me generation, the me nation. She's almost foreseeing what we're hearing in the rhetoric of our politicians, right? Come not so much from an excess of individualism as from an undeveloped individuality. I think that's extraordinary. I'm just going, oh. A failure to experience the depths of the differentness and otherness which surround us. A failure to learn to live with difference creatively. Okay, so what do? We slip back into old patterns of simple identity, where our individuality is linked to superficial markers of, I'm an American, I'm an Australian because of my passport and my ethnicity and my language and so on, and those others are not. And we have a very divided sense. So she says other way around, learning takes time. Everything we have been talking about, which can contribute to the building of a world of civic culture, involves learned behaviour. It does not just come from above. We have to learn to be healthy human beings. We have to learn to live in a civic culture that accepts differences. This involves new behaviours. Love it. Of course, she is speaking as a sociologist who understands that what we do, in actual fact, reflects the values and so on that sit beneath them, even if our doing is unconscious and the values are hidden. In the civic sphere, we have been slow learners. This is 1988, remember? While we must be patient with ourselves, we must also be serious about our intention to learn and take time to make more learning settings available, in other words, education, in our communities to meet our new needs to know. Paradoxically, by taking time, we can also be more ready to respond to crises. So that's the first of those, of the 3 sections that I wanted to read to you. And they flow beautifully together. So to pick that up over here, she's talking now about time and rhythms and so on. Just the sort of thing that, as I said, Jeannie was talking about in her lecture 4. But there was a larger rhythm, okay, that encompassed all other rhythms, the rhythm of creation itself. It was the sensing of that larger rhythm in the living, moving frame for all the smaller rhythms, right down to the moment-centered rhythm of family life, that pulse of the family, okay, that gave breathing space no matter what was going on. Awareness of the larger rhythm cannot be taken for granted, however. It has to be cultivated through reflection. This comes to the absolute crux, I think. The reflective life is a life in which time is taken for full attention to the larger rhythm. Almost brings me to tears. The attentive process goes by many names: meditation, contemplation, reverie, just plain thinking, and prayer. There are many ways to enter into the process. The one thing required is intentionality. One has to intend to reflect. Okay, so that's, in a sense, the practice, the core practice. That's what Futurists are on about. We need to understand our temporal natures, but we also have to extract ourselves from the temporal flows, the fast pace of being a consultant or me and my university running around chasing whatever it is that the institution requires, and say, no, I make time in my life to meditate. You may make time in whatever way you need. But for me, I extract myself regularly on a daily basis to take time out. And this brings us to the end, this very last point, which I think is just, it's a beautiful way to end. Because she talks about us as, we're not people, we are persons in becoming. And I think, this is really important, that if you want to take a Boulderian sort of thing, we wear the habitae or the habitus of different personas in different places. And that life and identity is a practice. So this is the last bit, and then I'll let you go. In the company of strangers, because that's what we live in, a planet that, with 8+ billion people now. She was writing when there was about 5+ billion people, the late 1980s. Living alongside mostly people who are strangers. How do we cope with strangers? In the company of strangers, we can always identify those who are on the path of becoming persons. Unhurried, they are at home in the world in a special way. Wherever they are, okay? Present to those around them in a special way. They are already a part of the world civic culture I've been writing about. They have been formed by it and are in turn forming it because, of course, there's that reciprocal flow. Their mental maps of the planet are rich in detail, and they serve as connecting points for many different networks. They understand how difficult a thing it is to grow up human in any society, and how necessary it is for us to help one another deal with our differences. They know that good intentions have to be assisted by enabling institutions, customs, some shared culture, and some shared ritual. They know a good deal about the current state of those enabling institutions, customs, shared culture, shared ritual, which already exists. They know also that we live in great crisis, and they see how inadequate our tools and understandings are to dealing with that crisis. But they also know something else, and this is very special. They know that human beings are inventive because they see and participate daily in human inventiveness. And they also know that more is at work in the world than human inventiveness. They know what an important role the unexpected plays in human affairs and are ready to be responsive to the unexpected. Most of all, they see the world as it is already. I think that's beautiful. So, I've often said to my own students or whoever will listen, we don't understand. We can see all the symptoms around us. We don't understand what's happening at the world civic culture level or the world consciousness level, the consciousness that we share as individuals in the company of strangers. We are becoming people, and with futures as a context, we can become better people and help others along the path, I think. Thanks for popping by. I really, really love this thinker.